should we integrate functions related to social medias in organization?
To social media?
Do they have a role to play?
In other words, meaning, you mean things like Twitter or things like...
Exactly. Well, have you tried that recently?
No.
You seem to know.
No, because I'm not on Facebook. Don't look for me on Facebook. The only reason I'm on, what do you call it? I can't even say it. The only reason I'm on LinkedIn is because my assistant Santa, who's sitting here, put it on so she could access certain addresses. I've never gone on to LinkedIn. I've never gone on to Facebook. I don't Twitter. But anyway, I'm what's called a techno peasant.
Well, I got another good one for the techno peasant that you are. It's sort of a...
Oh, let me just say something about networks and communities.
Yes.
Networks are relationships. They're important, and I think that social media are very good for networking. But communities are face-to-face, intimate kind of relationships, very different from networks. And that coaching is sort of interesting because it's very much a networking kind of thing, but it's built. We're using electronic media to bring this stuff down, but it's very much community. Those groups of 5, 6 managers who are meeting every couple of weeks for 90 minutes to talk about what they're doing are very much a community.
Well, I just wanted to expand on what you were saying. 2 questions. I'll raise the 2 issues and then you can give us the answers. What explains the apparent paradox between the absence of communityship in business while social networks are so popular? And you think the success of social media has a positive effect on communityship or just a new platform for business or marketing?
Well, I don't think it's just business or marketing, but I think in a way those questions sort of, you know, I could have answered that. I would have liked to see those questions after I said what I just said about the difference between networks and communities, because I think they're more about networks than about communities. When Guy and I did the paper on social initiatives, we basically talked about that social initiatives grow up largely in communities and really need the community sense, but they travel across the world by networks. So there's a few people sitting in Sydney, Australia, who say, let's close the lights for an hour as a token gesture of global warming. And next thing you know, a year later, millions and millions of people are closing their lights. Not because they're community connected, but because they're network connected with, I guess it was a little community, maybe it was an individual in Australia who got the original idea. In Brazil, you had these amazing initiatives around HIV/AIDS. Brazil has done more fantastic things about dealing with HIV/AIDS than any other country anywhere in the world. And as Guy was saying, it's hard to identify the leader. It was all kinds of communities. There was communities of prostitutes, communities of drug users, communities of priests, all sorts of people, communities among themselves, and also geographic communities, local communities mixed together who drove all this. And of course, they were networked across these communities. So for me, we're not, you know, if you look at what happened in Copenhagen, actually, compare Denmark with Copenhagen, because Copenhagen was an absolute total failure as in terms of global warming, just a humiliating failure. And yet here's Denmark, one of the most advanced countries in the world on wind and other alternate forms of power. It's a wonderful irony. So what you had was big government and to some extent certain big business blocking or at least slowing down what was happening in Copenhagen. You know, Clean Coal was not exactly an enthusiastic proponent of what was going on in Copenhagen, from what I can gather. So what you had was no effort at all. And then you get these community people getting together in Denmark and driving that kind of really serious change. That's how the world's going to change. That's how we're going to solve our problems. Governments are no longer capable, I think. This is a gross overstatement, but it won't be the first time this afternoon. but governments are becoming less and less capable of dealing with big issues because of the power of business and corporate influence in government, and because governments are so split. There's so many that are split down the middle these days. that governments are not capable of really dealing with big issues. We're not going to solve our big issues through government. I'm all in favor of socially responsible business, but a socially responsible company that worries about the environment is up against the BP or an Enron that maybe not be quite so, not an Enron, but an Exxon, that may not be quite so enthusiastic about these things, or the tar sands or whatever. So these things are going to be changed by people on the ground who are going to start to drive change and network with each other across the world.
Well, we started out by saying that we are in the midst of a crisis. You see more opportunities coming out of this crisis than bad news?
I'm not sure. I see opportunities coming out of the technology, because the technology is what enables these initiatives to spread. So Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh comes up with microfinancing, and now microfinancing is spreading all over the world because there's communication networks that bring it to other communities. He's even got it going in Queens, New York. And he says he's got people in microfinancing in Queens, New York who can't get a loan, and they can see Wall Street, or they can see downtown Manhattan at least, from Queens. They can't get loans in New York City. And so microfinancing is spreading even to the US. There's no such a thing as a developed and a developing country. The so-called developed countries are maybe 80 or 60 or 80% developed and 20 or 10% dirt poor. The developing countries are maybe 20% rich. You go to the fanciest part of Mumbai and you'll find just as fancy gated communities as the fanciest part of the US, or go to certain parts of New York City and you'll see slums that will be not quite, but roughly comparable to what you're going to see in Mumbai. So every country has both sides. Every country has both sides.
But in terms of what it will mean for corporations in the next 10 years, could we be optimistic that there is room for change and positive change?
I'm happy that there's a lot of attention to corporate social responsibility, but there are other pressures that I think are stronger. I think as citizen movements start to stop certain kinds of behaviors, if people don't like what Exxon is doing, there's ways to let Exxon know. If people don't like what other companies are doing, there are legal ways to let those companies know. And that kind of social networking, if it starts picking up, could change the way this world is unfolding.
But beyond that macro picture, if you were working today in a large corporation, would you say this is the time to make durable changes in our culture because we are weak, because we are facing some serious challenges, and this is the time to go to the front? I mean, just charge.
Yes, in many corporations. Yes, in many corporations, and they're the ones that get the attention around corporate social responsibility. The ones that really care and the ones that are really doing, and they're wonderful, and there are lots of them. But there are also an awful lot of others that are functioning through lobbying, through all sorts of things that are what I called earlier legal corruption. So they're both going on. I think the thing is tilted towards the latter right now, at least in the United States. I think that the social networking can tilt it the other way so that it becomes much harder to get away with that. So I don't want to condemn the corporate world at all. There are great corporations, wonderful corporations. I love them. I have great belief in them. We've got to deal with the others that sort of reduce things to a lowest common denominator.
Well, Professor Minzberg, rather, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Alors, I think you should stand up. Thank you.